A very good afternoon to you, Francis, and to our viewers once more. Well, this has been the case, and this has been the talk to say that really where to from here in terms of the conversations that have been had over time. Of course, we know very well that this establishment is about 3 years and really pushing to boost intra-Africa trade, and they want that to really be a reality, looking at, of course, accommodating the economies on the African continent. We're talking about 55 nations that have come through here to form part of this agreement, just really pushing to position Africa as the largest and global market and a powerhouse in terms of that industrialization prospect. But I'm going to bring some of them, the delegates, into the conversation now, and they'll just let us in and reflect with us in terms of how the days have been. I'll start with Dr. Imogen Densimana, coming through, of course, as the Secretary General of the African Standards Organization. Bonjour, welcome to the SABC. Bonjour. How has it been? Let's reflect. Let's talk about the past 3 days. We know very well that you are operating in this space, and for the longest of time, we've seen challenges and barriers towards this industrialization and this intra-Africa trade.
These last 2 days have been really good. Yeah, I saw the discussion around the AfCFTA and tujenge pamoja as what is being discussed here. The private sector, I can see, is ready to lead this implementation of the AfCFTA. And most importantly, what I have seen is the issue of standard coming in. The private sector talking about the standard, how the standard can help the implementation of this AfCFTA. The other part which was very much interesting is to see like the areas of pharmaceuticals and automotive that are not the common areas being discussed by our private sector. And the role, I can see the role of our organization as Organization for Standardization being part of the whole process.
How do we improve that process of standardization and make sure that really we get the best out of it from the African continent and the economies get to move in that regard?
It's very important to look at harmonization of standard at the continental level and actually look at how we can go into the mutual recognition arrangement among the countries when a product can come from country A to B and being not subjected to new testing.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much for your time. It's coming through there as Dr. Imogen Densimana, as the Secretary, of course, of the Secretary General of the African Standards Organization, just talking about really when we look at it, how we can ensure that there's movement here in these markets on the African continent. I'm going to bring into the conversation again Advocate Sonwabile Mangochwa, coming through as the chairperson of the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency. Of course, you're also here to play a role. There have been barriers towards the transformation of the African economies. Really reflect with us in terms of how has it been.
Thanks so much. Unless we remove barriers, in a number of areas to ensure integration of Africa. So this conference managed to actually discuss some of those issues like, immigration, movement of people, movement of goods and services, for instance, including cross-border. One of the areas that we're looking at, for instance, is the whole issue of ensuring that they will cut the time of people and goods and services, because that's longevity is affecting a business. Remember, here we want to strengthen Africa, and so all of those barriers, they affect the competitive edge that Africa should have. So although the issue of taxation, as I've mentioned, the issue of regulation, that we need to harmonize the regulations, to ensure that, if you talk about Zimbabwe and ourselves, there's harmony. The law enforcement is also very much important. Like now, cross-border, we're happy that law enforcement is now with us. It was with RTMC, but is now relocated to us, and we're happy about that, because that's going to make us, better strengthen on that. But also inter-coordination in countries themselves, like in South Africa, between the Home Affairs and ourselves, because Home Affairs is dealing with immigration. We are dealing with the movement of goods and cargo. So all of those systems that we're creating must actually speak to each other at the end of the day, so that we must ensure that we're able to achieve results. Otherwise, in different areas, whether talk about agriculture, whether we're talking about pharmaceuticals, and so forth, these are cross-cutting, issues. Unless we remove those barriers, and I think this conference has achieved that, at least to create, those norms and standards, in different countries, to actually ensure that actually we don't really need Europe, it's just Africa.
I mean, we've seen as well, the Chinese actually and China entering the free market space. What would be your response to what has been happening in that front?
I think colonialism is colonialism, but you see colonialism of a special type, because here in geopolitics, each and every country wants to strengthen itself. So there's really no dinner friends in geopolitics. It's about interests, I think what's important, is that, Africa, unless Africa increases its own bargaining power, as I think this is what this conference also, seeks to do. If you look at, the EU, I mean, the EU is actually, Europe is actually, strengthening itself so that it must be better organized, and there's a competitive edge. So I think in this conference, unless we deal with these issues, I think the issues have been ventilated in the conference. I think as cross-border, we're also taking with us to say that these issues, of course, we're a regulatory body. We're talking to other people in SADC. There must be uniformity. There must be policy cohesion, in Africa. All these things that I've actually, mentioned. And unless we do that, and I think we are there. What's also important is monitoring tools, because you must be able to say that in the previous conference, there are things that we discussed, so that we don't just meet in a talk show, but we must be.
It's encouraging, if I can come in there into time. It's encouraging that we are seeing a movement, and there's talks around the issues of making sure that we keep track and we monitor each other. This is the first in-person of its kind business forum. Hopefully, going forward, Advocate, things would change in this regard. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence here on the SABC. That is Advocate Sonwabile Mantlotshwa, coming through as the chairperson of the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency. Just the role of regulation, talking about really how we need to harmonize the economies on the African continent to get the best out of this. Here we're talking about an economy about $1.3 trillion that exists on the African continent. Of course, about 1.3 million consumers as well are the ones that are set to benefit from what is happening here. And we're hearing that there's a movement, and they're going to evaluate and monitor each other to ensure that this does not become another talk shop. Let's hand it over to you again in studio, Francis.